That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Happy Today podcast with me. I'm Ryan Woods. I am the creator of Lady Maga USA. And every day in this country, it's becoming a little more challenging to choose happiness and to choose joy and move forward with optimism in our hearts. So please, let's all make the decision to be happy today. I know some of my podcasts are definitely Debbie Downers, but today's podcast is truly something that I know will inspire your heart, and it will help you realize that we are one and we are all in this together, no matter who you are. So, my guest on today's podcast is a transgender man. And the transgender issue is just such a hot topic on all fronts in our country right now. And I am often accused of being transphobic. You hate transgender people because I do post about that only a woman can menstruate, only a woman can give birth. And so for my personal labels on this show, I believe that if you are an adult person and you're living your life as the opposite gender, like Caitlyn Jenner or my guest today, then I will respect your gender identity. I just don't think it should be legislated or considered a hate crime if someone doesn't want to do that. So anyway, without further ado, I'm actually very nervous right now because my guest is very famous on Twitter. He's very infamous in a lot of circles, and I'm intimidated somewhat to be having a conversation with someone who is so outspoken and just out there. So I'm looking at my guest right now on our Zoom meeting, and I would just like you to introduce yourself loud and proud as you want our listeners to know who you are.
Well, first off, thank you, my friend. No need to feel that way. I'm pretty much grounded, I think, on some level. So, hey, everybody, I'm Buck Angel, and I am a man who was born a woman and transitioned to live as a man 27 years ago. And so, I'm pretty much, I think I'm kind of controversial these days in the trans community. I also use the term transsexual. So I identify more as a transsexual person than a transgender person.
Okay, well, and we call you Buck, right?
Yep, Buck.
Okay,
Right.
and you go by Tranpa.
Trampa sometimes. That's right. Because I'm so old.
No, oh honey, you look great. You look amazing. But yeah, the good news is since you were born a woman and you transitioned into a man, men get to age with so much more like dignity and respect. I mean, think of Sean Connery. He was a hunk until, even now, like Sean Connery, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I don't think you should consider yourself old because since you do live your life as a man, you can get as old as you want and still be
there
totally
is that
hot.
that for sure. There's that double standard, right? Of women can't get old or get wrinkles where men can't. So on some level, that's why I really do fight for women's rights, because I lived half my life as a woman. And so I got so much pushback as a woman. So I'm used to pushback. That's why when I get pushback now as a trans man who speaks differently than majority of the community, I'm kind of used to pushback.
Well, I applaud the fact that you are willing to take pushback because most people are not. Most people are afraid to stand up for what they believe in. But I will confess, so I am a biological man. I live my life as a man, and I do have that knowledge that I can grow my beard, which is man contour, of course, and I can live my life as a man, and I'll probably look better when I'm in my 50s or 60s than I do now in some ways. But as a drag artist, it's funny that you mentioned the pressure you felt as a woman, because as a drag artist, because I do a female impersonation and dress up as a female character, I definitely feel the agony of, oh my gosh, I need to be skinny, I need to look like Barbie, I don't want my wrinkles to show, I don't want the veins on my hands to show. So I actually do understand how it does feel to be a woman with these unrealistic Kim Kardashian beauty standards and airbrush photos of J-Lo everywhere. So oh my gosh, we have so much to dive into. So I saw a picture of you online when you were living your life as a woman, and you were absolutely gorgeous. And I just think it's fascinating to explore why you decided to transition. And then, of course, we're going to jump into a lot of issues because I know a lot of our listeners today are wondering what your political agenda really is
Mhm.
as a trans person. And I think both you and I agree that the LGBTQIA plus XYZ movement has
Mhm.
completely hijacked
That's right.
common sense transgender adults and common sense gay people like me. And that's why we've sort of walked away. And I know you've been viciously attacked for your views. So I guess let's just dive into your heart a little bit, if you don't mind. Talk
Yeah.
to me about how you felt as a little girl and then living your life as a woman, and what actually led you to transition to the, very alpha
Mhm.
bearded man that you are today.
So with that, I was born in 1962 and I grew up in Los Angeles, California. And so back in the 60s and 70s, you could be a little tomboy. No, there was no social media, none of the stuff that's happening today that I think puts a lot of pressure on youngsters. So that being said, I was just a tomboy. I was a little buck. My parents were super cool with it. It was no pressure. The pressure came from other kids sometimes, or the pressure came from school teachers or friends of my parents saying that's your daughter, not your son. And so, there was pushback because people didn't understand, especially back then. But I can just say to you that I always felt like a little boy, and that was just where I was at. And so, I get this thing. What does that even mean to be a little boy? Well, what it meant was I didn't connect with the little girls. I connected with the little boys, and that was always my space. And so, what happened was puberty and teenage times, and which just sends everybody into a spiral. I don't want to say that puberty is the end all be all of anything. Every kid deals with puberty, and whatever that is, whatever your identity choice, whatever, we all deal with it, and it puts you in a spiral. And it did that for me, and I became very suicidal, and I had 2 suicide attempts. I was mental, I was institutionalized in a mental hospital, and I became a cutter, and I became a drinker, an alcoholic, and a drug addict, and eventually homeless, and all the bad things, and just down spiral because I didn't have what a lot of the kids have today. I didn't have a support group, or even in my therapist that I went to all just called me a very male identified female, and they couldn't have the language. Anyway, eventually I found a therapist who did say, well, I can understand that you feel like a man. And, from because of her, we got to sort of figure out how to find space for me to transition. But that was before internet. And so I didn't have the tools. And I was lucky enough to find 2 doctors in Los Angeles who were willing to do the work on me without any background. I was actually called a guinea pig. So I am an experiment. I'm an experiment that I find actually worked out for me. So, but I want to say this, my whole goal was to live as a man. It was never to live non-binary, never to live as a gay person. It was to live as a man. And so that's why I reclaimed transsexual, which is really somebody who's in a medical space. I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and the thing that relieves that is to physically change the way I looked in order to create a space for me to walk the world like this. So now nobody misgenders me. I'm literally a dude. I do not get bottom surgery, so I do still have that female unquote female part, but that's okay. I learned to live with it, and I've learned to walk the world this kind of man. And so I've had a beautiful, amazing life. And that's why I really do speak out and give back to the world, because I believe that what I have done is powerful. And what I believe that I do not need to shut up because I don't follow what everybody else thinks. That's ridiculous. And then if that's the case, then I don't belong in the trans community, because that's not community to me.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unwrap in this podcast. First off, I want to thank you for being openly vulnerable about your struggles,
Thank you.
because one of the counter arguments that is often thrown at transgender people or even gay people is that you are crazy, you are mentally ill.
That's
And
right.
so it sort of validates their stereotype that, you are crazy, you were a drug addict, you
Right.
are mentally ill. And that's something that we can unwrap, because I don't think that a capable adult who makes the decision to transition after going through so much is
Mhm.
necessarily mentally ill. In your case, it sounds like it saved your life. So
Right.
I want to talk a little bit more about the origins of why you wanted to transition.
Mhm.
And then, of course, later I do want to jump into the politics. I want to talk about Trump. I want to
Yep.
talk about children and transgender procedures. I want to talk about critical race theory as it pertains to the LGBTQIA plus what I consider indoctrination of children.
Mhm.
So as a young person, you clearly felt entirely different.
Mhm.
And this is a question that might give some of these leftists a little leeway.
Mhm.
Do you feel that when you were 9, 10 years old, you would have benefited from testosterone injections and potential surgeries as a minor?
So that's an excellent question. And so it's a very, very volatile question.
Well, of course. Yeah. I mean, that's the issue. And I'll just fully disclose, here in Utah, I have gone to the state legislature and I have been involved in groups that are trying to make transgender procedures only for adults. And my personal belief is just that when you are 10, when you are 13, you already are in such a confusing time of life. And I just feel like it's best if transgender procedures are made when you really, really know that you're transgender and you really know that this is the path you want to take. And I don't just come to this from a place of like outsider cisgender, biological man opinions. I have had very close special friendships with transgender people, and I have seen how hard it is to transition.
It
It
is.
takes a mental toll,
That's
it takes
right.
an emotional toll, and
Mhm.
of course, it takes a major physical toll. So, my personal belief, and it's okay if you disagree, of course,
Yeah.
but my personal belief is that a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old is not emotionally or mentally capable of handling that dramatic and difficult process. So, please elaborate and tell me how you
Right.
feel about that.
So how I feel about it is individuals. So we are all individuals. What worked for me might not work for you. And that you can say that about anything. A diet, right? Diets that are blanket statements. That's ridiculous. You're selling something that works for me, but it might not. So I look at transitioning medically the same way. And why I'm very, very, very outspoken about mental health care, and that I really believe that children should be going through some type of therapy, some type of mental health care, and not affirmative. We have what we call affirmative, which is basically not being able to push back, because then they start to call that conversion therapy, which is, you see, they're manipulating the words. I disagree with that. If it wasn't for my therapist, I would not be here. And so what happens with therapy is it gives you an opportunity to think about what you're about to do that can be irreversible. When you cut your breasts off, no, you're not getting your breast back. When you take out your female reproductive system, you're not getting it back. And some kids are doing that at 16 and 17. Now, that being said, again, I'm not going to say whether or not you're making the right choice or not, because that's not my place. And I did suffer and I did get to this space. What I believe as an older transsexual man who transitioned many years ago is that I think we need to slow down. And I think we need to say, yeah, this kid could be trans, most definitely, of course, or they could be gay. So why are we not giving that opportunity for this 8-year-old who says they're trans now? Because I never said I was trans at 8. Why? Because I did not get that language. I just said I was a boy. So what, now we have this language given to youngsters, which can be good or can be bad. Again, it's so new that we don't really know. So I'm going to say that no, I do not think an 8-year-old should be medically transitioning, but that could be wrong for 1 out of 25 million kids, right? So what I believe in is, yes, I believe we do have kids who think this way, and I think that they need to go through a system, but we don't have that system now. We have a rapid push through. We have what's called affirmative gender care, which means that you do not get any pushback. The parents aren't even allowed to sort of on some level speak up for their children. They're taking the rights away of parents, which I'm a parent, by the way. And so I, again, have a lot of lived experience here. I'm not just coming to the table with, oh no, you can't just match weird. No, no, no. That is not where I'm coming from. And it's why I wonder why some of the people in our community push back on me so hard, because I'm just coming to it with a, hey, let's have a conversation here. I'm not saying my idea is right and yours is wrong. I'm saying, wait, let's have we are talking about children. I'm not talking about an adult who can make an informed choice for themselves. I don't care about adults. I'll be honest with you right here. I don't care.
Neither
what
do
you,
I. I honestly feel like this
nope.
is America.
That's
Gosh
right.
darn it. And
That's right.
you can do whatever you want. If you want to tattoo your body from head to
Right.
toe, if you want to have transgender surgeries, if you want to be a drag artist, if you want to be a right-wing Christian, power to you. The
That's right.
only thing at the end of the day is we have to respect one another's American secular freedoms
That's right.
and not try to silence someone else's actions or free speech if it is in fact not hurting us. So I recently did a debate with the Westboro Baptist Church.
Wow.
And and their website is godhatesfags.com. And of course that's terrible. Of course it's terrible. But I would die on the altar of free speech to say that they should be able to say what they feel.
That's
because in an ideal world with the marketplace of ideas, we can socially tell them that that is bad, that it is terrible, and you should take that down. But forcing it or silencing anyone's free speech or actions as an adult, especially if it's between consenting adults or an adult who consents to these surgeries, it is none of my business.
That's right.
I really admire your honesty in saying that you do believe that sometimes transitioning younger might be necessary, but what is missing from the conversation is a real talk with a 14-year-old or a real talk with a 9-year-old and their parents. And by the way, their parents better darn be involved in that conversation.
That's right.
They are children and you are a parent.
That's right.
So the idea now, correct me if I'm wrong, this is where I see things going, especially pushed by Pride Centers and the Human Rights Campaign and GLAAD and Equality Utah and all these multi-million-dollar organizations with a lot of power. One, I think you'll agree with me on this. So in modern America, whether you're conservative, Democrat, a grandma, grandpa, whatever, everybody does have a gay family member or an LGBT family member. And we're talking about regular old gay people, lesbians, and transgender adults. And they don't care. And it's kind of it's over. Like nobody really cares. And the myth that there's this horrible homophobia out there just doesn't match factual reality. So what did these organizations have to do? They had to create a new savior complex so that they could present themselves with a brand new victim narrative. And their narrative everywhere right now is trans, and trans kids, trans children. And I've spoken with other adult trans people, and they say they weaponize the idea of trans suicide and their suicidality. And then they shut you down if you question whether or not this is the best decision for a child. And of course, we've seen that it has become illegal with threat of removing your license for a child therapist in many places across the world and in the United States to say, you know what, you identify as a girl, but you're 10 years old. And I feel like we have a lot to talk about before we jump to the conclusion that hormone therapy and testosterone and estrogen and puberty blockers and medical procedures are for you. So ideally, let's say you have a little kid, they're 11 years old, and they are a girl who is not interested in makeup, not interested in traditionally feminine things like dresses or pink or Barbie. And they go to a therapist in 2021 and they say, I am a boy. What would the ideal therapeutic setting be for a child like that? I won't call it an epidemic, but I will say that my nephew is a Mormon church leader in the Mormon church, and half of the kids in his group are identifying as non-binary and or trans. And I get message after message from parents who are saying that their young child is trans. So I feel like when they go to a therapist, what would a responsible therapist say? And I'm sorry for being so wordy, but I want to get this right. I don't want to come across
I appreciate that.
Anti-trans or whatever.
Right. No, and you'll be called it anyway, just because of your name.
Well, and because I interviewed you.
And then because you interviewed me, that's right. Even though I'm an actual real live transsexual man.
Exactly.
There I am.
Yeah.
So again, these questions. The other problem is in conversations, which I really enjoy conversations with people I might not necessarily politically align with, or other things we might not align with. But the fact that me and you get to have a conversation and be so civil towards each other because we learn from each other. That's just what I want to say before I go on. But that being said, these conversations are difficult, and my community doesn't want to have this conversation. So that's the part that I first off think is really weird. Like, I can't have the idea what I'm going to say now because what I'm saying is supposedly transphobic when I'm an actual trans person. How can I be transphobic? That's just so weird.
Well, it's kind of like with the black thing that Joe Biden said.
Yeah.
If you didn't vote for me, you ain't black.
That's
if
right.
You don't align with the modern LGBTQIA plus narrative.
That's
you
right.
ain't trans. I'm called an internalized homophobe. Like, I'm not joking. No, I'm not joking. In my own family, sweetheart. In my own family.
I get called that all internalized trans. That is an actual gaslighting phrase that they created so you won't speak up. They created it so you won't say it. So it's just a creation.
And it's a way of dismissing you because your views make them uncomfortable, and your views make them question their own narrative. And it's so funny because you are a freaking expert on trans issues.
I mean, my God, I was an actual guinea pig. I was an actual experiment for all these kids today. So, that being said, of course, I'm older. I have much more conservative views on the world, on everything. That's an age thing. There's no doubt about it. 20 years, 30 years ago, I would have had a whole other opinion about things. So that's the thing, is I'm coming to my community, which I actually even despise community because that doesn't really mean anything anymore.
We're individuals, my friend. That's right. Individualism is the foundation of America, and the collective hive mind of the LGBTQIA plus agenda is so dangerous. It takes away your autonomy and your individualism. So please continue. I'm loving this conversation.
That's right. So we need to have these conversations that are difficult. That's the reason that you have them. So that being said, today what we have is called affirmative therapy. And so that to me is not the ideal therapy. To me, the ideal therapy is my therapist that I had, who had no skills whatsoever. She was a gay woman. She did not try to talk me out of being a trans person. She didn't even understand it. She just said, okay, Buck, I hear you. Now let's have the conversation. How do we find out what's going on with you? So we started digging, and for over a year, we dug until I even started hormones, I actually lived as Buck. So I had to walk the world in my boy clothes, and I had to literally get misgendered every day. I had to, excuse me, I'm really a man, I'm not a woman. Like, I had to deal with a lot of nonsense. The kids today would just literally keel over and die.
Oh, they would. They couldn't handle it because the snowflake generation.
It's insane.
The idea now is that you have the political right to never be offended, and it just weakens all of us, and it weakens. I was bullied. I had eggs smashed on my head. Of
course you were.
I had to get a variance to another middle school because of threats of violence. It was bad, but I will say that I'm glad that I had to learn, grow through it, and develop a tough skin. As life has gone on, I think you and I are able to handle the adult bullying online every day, the insults, because we developed a thick skin. So I actually have somebody at my door. I will be right back.
Okay? Oh yeah, go on.
All right. So we're back, and Buck, I want you to know something. I actually feel quite emotional. Mm-hmm. Because you I on a certain level, I know exactly what you've been through, being different, having people not understand who you are. And in today's culture, like, I put on a brave face on social media and I clap back, but being excommunicated from our so-called community is painful.
That's right.
I know you and I both, we had dear friends who are gay, lesbian, transgender, drag artists, whatever, within that community, who consider us the devil now. Yep. And they've cut us off. So it's just an honor. I now consider you my friend.
Yep.
And I just I applaud your courage in having this conversation. So let's get back to the idea of affirmative therapy, which I understand. for the listeners who don't know what that is, that's where a therapist is legally required and or pressured by their boards and their policies to not question a child if they say they are the opposite gender. And of course, we've been talking about the idea that a lot of children think they're transgender when they simply might just be goth or different or a tomboy or a gay child. I feel like a lot of gay children are being convinced that they are in fact trans when maybe they're just homosexual. So let's say you have an 11-year-old and you take them to therapy because they believe they're the opposite gender. What would you want a therapist to say to one of these very vulnerable children?
First and foremost, I would want them to have this compassion. Of course, it's super important when it comes to especially children and dealing with their own self, so what I would want the therapist to say is that whatever you say in this room right here, you're not going to be judged by it. It's not going to be anything other than it's a free space for you to talk about the things that you need to talk about that maybe you can't talk about to mom and dad or your brothers or your sisters, but to know that I am not going to judge you. Even an 11-year-old understands that, especially today. So, for me, it was that space where I could talk about the things that I kept getting shut down. When I said I feel like a little boy, I got shut down all the time, and so that is what I have learned through my millions of years of therapy is that you need to feel safe in there. And so I think that's why they created this affirmative space so that the child isn't being pushed back on. But then on the flip side, I think, well, what if the child is gay, but you're immediately assessing this child as trans? That's the part that and I do feel that there's on some level a homophobic agenda attached to the trans space. And I speak about it all the time. When you try to say biology doesn't exist, well, then you're discounting people, especially like 99% of the world, and you're discounting same-sex attraction, and that's important to many people. So yeah, gender is different than sex. They're two separate spaces. You can totally create your own gender identity. I believe that, but I do not believe you can actually change your sex. I didn't change my sex. I am actually a biological woman. And so that's the thing that really upsets people when I talk about biology, because it's a factual space. And so we don't know what's going on in this child's head at 11 unless you really go and do a long time and help this kid and figure this kid out. And maybe this kid just isn't trans, and maybe you're not going to have to medicalize. I think that should be one of the most important parts of this conversation. Medicalize it. I'm a medicalized person. Forever I have to shoot testosterone. Forever I have to do that. That is not a fun space to be in, and not something that I want to be, but I have to be in order to be alive. If that child needs it, let's give it to that child. But maybe let's just give it a 50-50 chance here that the child isn't, and you medicalize that child, and then in 5 years the child says, what? I'm not this person. We have a thing called detransitioners now. Why are we having such an upswing, in which they also try to hide?
Oh,
right?
no, the detransitioners, the people who say, I regret taking hormones.
That's right.
I'm fairly well versed in like the medical procedures for these young people. Mm-hmm. And I'll preface this by saying that it is becoming a billion dollar industry. And so at the end of the day, whenever something is being pushed that you're like, why is this being pushed so heavily? People are getting money and they are getting power. The LGBTQIA plus movement, their organizations, their six-figure salaries, they gain power by having a victim narrative and claiming that they are the saviors of potentially suicidal trans kids. And the pharmaceutical industry, it has become, the number of people going on hormones and all of this is astronomical, and they're making a lot of money. So when it comes to children who think they are trans, but a lot of people think I'm transgender. It's actually fairly frustrating because the reason they think that is because in the modern LGBTQIA narrative, gay people and good old fashioned drag queens are not part of it. It's on RuPaul's Drag Race, they have transgender drag queens who have a boob job, who have, oh, you cut out for a second there.
I lost you for a minute. No.
Come back. Here, let me hit pause real quick.
So,
All right, we had a little glitch in the matrix
yeah.
there. It's probably because we're being recorded and watched right now, and we're going to be reported as potential terrorists after having this conversation. No, I'm not even joking. I think eventually they're going to release everybody's private recordings, Alexa conversations
Oh
in the
yeah,
name of
for
safety,
sure.
but that's another conversation. So what I was saying is, in the modern LGBTQIA plus narrative, there is no more space for just traditionally gay biological men. And even in RuPaul's Drag Race, they're celebrating transgender drag queens when it's okay to say that this form of entertainment is entertaining because you take a big 6'2" manly man like myself and they have to transform themselves very
Right.
painfully, very artistically to
Yep.
create an illusion. And these transgender drag queens have a boob job, they have a butt lift, they have lip injections, they shave their jawline. So what's the
It doesn't
point?
make sense. It
So
doesn't make sense at
right.
all.
So
None.
the trans ideology, they jump right to it. If you're different, if you like makeup, if you like pink, if you like Barbie, if you don't want to play sports, if you're effeminate, they jump right to the conclusion that people are trans. So recently I got a phone call from a patriot in Utah, and he told me that his brother's son was actually hiding women's clothing in his room and dressing up outside of the home, kind of living a double life. I think he's 14. And I just said, okay, well, with these kids, and this is my advice to parents as a drag artist, and I'm pretty sure you'll concur with what I'm about to say. I said that child, because he likes dresses, probably likes makeup, is going to be predatorily recruited into the idea that he is in fact trans, where maybe he just likes dresses. Maybe he just wants to So we are experiencing a few glitches here. So if some comments are missing, the gist of what I was saying is this is a 14-year-old boy who's interested in dresses, who is probably interested in makeup. And if he goes to his LGBTQIA plus counselors or the school, they are going to push that young man into thinking he's transgender, where I think he should have the freedom to identify with his biological body, regardless of fashion, regardless of makeup or nail polish. Throughout history, look at the Egyptians, look at the Aztecs, look at Versailles. The societal norms of clothing have always been all over the place. Long hair, short hair, makeup, heels, lace. So I just think it's so farcical for these people to say that gender does not exist. But if you're different and you're a girl who likes football or you're a boy who loves Barbie, that means you are in fact in the wrong body. And that's where I feel like the manipulation is so dangerous. And they're not talking about legitimately transgender people like you who needed to grow up and transition. And that's why there's so much detransition or regret among people who made the decision because of societal pressure. I'll open up to you right now. I also am a suicide survivor, and I was hospitalized. And before they would release me after my suicide attempt, they said, you have to go to an LGBTQ therapy program. And in there, there definitely was a push telling me that you very well may be transgender, and this is why you're suffering. So they convinced me, oh, you should explore your pronouns. So I was like, okay, call me her, whatever, like I'm open to anything. I'm so broken right now that I'll go with it. And so I actually did consider myself like, maybe I'm transgender, because they're kind of presenting that as a one size fits all solution for your problems within the LGBTQIA plus narrative. So I wore a little makeup. I said, call me her, call me whatever. And I was flirting with the clothing and the hair, but I went to a drag show, and I had actually never been, except maybe once. And I watched the drag queen on the stage with the fan blowing the hair and the spotlight and the sparkle. And I realized I want to explore all of that because I love it, and I've loved sparkles and magic and big hair and Barbie since, and Disney princess since I was a kid. So I want to explore that, but I don't think that changes my biological reality.
That's
Does that
right.
make sense?
Of
So
course.
so I mean,
I'm always honest about my biology.
yeah. In your case, why didn't you want to simply just live as a woman
Hmm.
who, wears whatever the heck she wants, regardless of what anybody else thinks? Because
That's
that's
right.
what I do. I'm a man who loves so-called women stuff, and
That's
I
right.
just live my life and I wear what I want and I do what I want. So
That's right.
what within you made you feel like, well, I don't want to just be a biological woman who wears, you know,
Mhm.
uh, camo hats and stuff like that. Talk to
Mhm.
me a little bit about that journey.
Well, I did live as a gay butch gay woman for a long time. Pretty much, I think when I came out in my maybe 20s as a gay woman, all the way until my transition, which was in my early 30s. So that being said, for many years I lived in that space, and I tried it, and I really made an effort to live as a female. But I had internal turmoil constantly. I drank. I was a major alcoholic because I could not be emotional with women. I never felt comfortable sexually. I always felt like people would call me she, and I wanted them to call me he. And I tried it. So I guess really my answer to that is I tried for many years. I tried, and then it didn't work for me. And then when I did my transition, it changed my life in such a way that I'm here today. It saved my life, and it's why I'm so attached to finding the children who are like me. The children today are not all like me. There's many different variations of trans now. It's like all kinds of stuff all over, but there are kids, and that's why I said again, transsexual. There are transsexual children like me. And so I stay in this narrative, and I stay in this very toxic environment because I see those kids, and I know they're there, and I know that they need to see me because they're not seeing me within what, and they're being told other things, and they're being told that they're wrong for medically transitioning, and they're told that they're being called true scum, and all these really nasty things that these kids are like saying that they're not really trans. And so that hurts my feelings, and it hurts my feelings that even I get a lot of ageist remarks from these youngsters, which who do not understand. Before me there were people, and if it wasn't before them, I wouldn't be here. The fact that we just sort of dishonor the elders in our community, because we do on many levels,
Oh, absolutely. In
is
our culture, we
disgusting.
do not. My mom
Yeah.
passed away recently, and
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
I watched the ageism when you're waiting in line, and
Uh,
she would talk about how she's completely overlooked, and
yep.
but so yeah, so people dismiss
Yep.
you because you're older
Yep.
and you're
That's right.
grandpa and you're
That's right.
different.
And I have
Um,
a different way of thinking. And my
right.
different way of thinking is not the way the younger generation or the narrative of the trans community is. And because of that, because of just the fact that I have a different opinion, I never push on anybody. I only state factual information, and I only state my own experience. Yet I get pushed back on like I'm the devil, like I'm literally trying to burn up the trans community when I've done 30 plus years of work, and I've literally walked the world naked in my work. And it takes a lot. It has taken its toll on me. I've been abused from day one that I decided to put myself out there. So it's not new, but I've always been on the forefront of sort of creating change on some level. And so that's why I'm not fearful of being pushed against. I'm actually saddened by it, the way it has become,
Well,
that I'm this bad person.
when you're talking about the bullying and the
Yep.
ostracization or whatever the
Yep.
word is, and being persecuted and
Yep.
insulted over and over, I
Yep.
don't think you're really talking about religious people. I think you're talking primarily about your own
That's right.
so-called LGBTQIA plus trans community.
That's right.
So here's where I want to build some bridges and create some understanding, because
Right.
um, last night I went to a meeting with one of Utah's most controversial activists. Her name is Natalie Klein. She's deeply hated by the LGBTQ community. She's, being told she's homophobic, she's transphobic, she's awful, she's going to create suicide. And her stance is basically, because I went to the meeting and I
Okay.
hadn't
Yeah.
met her in
Good for
person,
you.
and I
Yeah.
stood up and just said, "Hey, Natalie, everyone is trying to shut down your free speech, and that is abhorrent. We cannot shut
Yep.
down anyone's voice.
Nope.
But I want to stand up right now as a gay man and a drag artist and ask you, do you believe in my American secular freedoms to live my life as I choose? And she said, yes. Now, the reason she's controversial is because with critical race theory, and a lot of what she considers indoctrination and what I consider indoctrination in schools has gone too far. How do you feel we can best educate everyone, including minors, about the idea of transgenderism and transitioning and all of that? What would be kind of an ideal curriculum, a fair curriculum in your, if you were the one writing the curriculum, what would you put in there?
So first off, what I would do is I would make sure that we have a space that gives all of us a voice in that, not just a particular narrative, because I don't think what's being taught today is necessarily a reflection of myself. I get left out of that equation because what I did is a sex change, unquote, quote unquote, and that isn't looked upon as a great thing these days on some level. I went from, I want to live in the binary. And so one of the things I believe that teaching about LGBT to young people is important, because I do believe that there are kids there who will grow up and come into our community. If they're not being told that there are two mommies and two daddies, which might not sit with some of your listeners and might not be okay, that's okay. But the reality of it is that there are families who have two mommies and two daddies. And so we need to let people understand. Like my child goes to a private school here. And so the principal happens to be a gay woman and her partner. And we talk about it all the time. And it's part of the thing. And my kid doesn't even because to my kid, he doesn't know about me. And so, we just look like a regular mom and dad, but we're not a regular mom and dad. And so I think having those conversations are really important. Now, that's the part that we need to have the discussion that I heard what you said, indoctrination. This is a thing that is happening not only in our community, but I think it happens in all kinds of communities, right? People want you to be a part of that thing because of power in numbers. And so I do think on some level, because of language, it can be sort of indoctrinated depending on who's talking about it, how they're talking about it, right? Even critical race theory, that is a very, very volatile space too. There's so much hate towards it and there's so much love towards it. I do think we should be talking about racism in schools. And I do think we should be talking about things that are difficult for the past of our country.
Well, of course we should. And I think we already have been. I mean,
yeah, we have been. You're right.
I went through the public school system. I learned that the Holocaust was terrible. I learned that slavery was terrible. I learned about the civil rights movement and the evil people who did not want Black children to share the same drinking fountain. I think it's already there. But what's happening now, and I believe this is happening in schools with pressure from political activists and lobbyists and the Human Rights Campaign to perpetuate a victim narrative. And one of the reasons people on the right don't like people like you and me is because they have the idea of recruitment, that we are trying to infiltrate the conservative movement. We're trying to water down religiously conservative people. We don't believe in their free speech. And I can tell just from talking to you that we believe in the free speech and religious beliefs of all people.
All people.
Now, here's a tough question I have for you. Let's say theoretically, we have a 13-year-old girl who believes she is transgender, and it's difficult for her. She feels like a misfit. We know at school and online in 2021, she will find resources and a community immediately that will embrace who she is. And it's even going so far as teachers and counselors telling these children that don't talk to your parents about this. We will help you. And they're taking away parental rights. So my question is it okay that legally an evangelical parent or a Mormon parent is able to tell their child, you have to wait until you're 18? Is that child abuse, or is that something that it's a parent's prerogative to say, you know what, I love you, but we're not doing any medical stuff until you're old enough to know what you're doing? Is that abusive, or is that just kind of the way the cookie crumbles?
Right. No, it's a great question. And again, I don't think it's a black and white, a yes or no question. I really don't think so, because again, I really believe that we are all in different spaces. And so you cannot say blanket statements like that and expect everyone to adhere to that, because it's not going to be. Now, that being said, as a parent, I do believe that I have the right to tell my child, well, no, we're going to think about this for a minute. And in fact, we're going to send you to some therapy. Now, what I don't want to hear a parent say is, no, that's weird. That's fucked up. You're not going to think that way. Excuse me for the word, that's just not okay. And so that to me is what we need to understand is there's going to be parents who are going to be like, no, you're not. We're going to send you to this crazy school. We're going to change your mind and all of that stuff. So again, right? To me, it's just not that easy of a question to answer.
Right. It's a very nuanced topic. Where do the parental rights end? What language is abusive?
That's
because
right.
the documentary crew that was with me, I talked about growing up Mormon. I identify with Elsa from Frozen because keep the gloves on. You're different. You're bad. And then I had my awakening and I let it go.
Yeah.
And I'm very open and honest about my struggles with suicide and the many reasons that I did have that struggle.
Yeah.
And so they talked about it. It felt pretty good. And then they sat me down and said, so you believe that it should be legal for Mormon people to tell their child that gay is bad, thus pushing them to suicide the way you had it.
Wow. They say that to me all the time. That's not what you said. That's not what you said.
That's not what I said. It was difficult. But I think education, conversations, and people like you and me, that's why we are so critical to say, I'll just share what happened with that guy who called me about his brother's child who's 14, who hid girl clothes in his rooms, and he's doing that. This is all I said. I said, tell me about the father who is upset about this. He said he is an alpha male. He is a staunch Mormon. He's horrified about this, and it's incredibly difficult for him. And he said, that's why I'm calling you on behalf of him, because he probably wouldn't talk to you, to discuss what to do. And I said, my advice is very simple. This child is either going to turn to the LGBTQIA plus Little Nas X, Demi Lovato narrative, or they're going to talk to their parents. So I said that father needs to take that 14-year-old, squeeze him physically to his chest, say, I love you about 5 times, because he does. Say, I love you about 5 times. Then sit them down and say, your one and only true safe space is with me. And you can talk about anything that is awkward or sexual or weird or uncomfortable with me, your dad. And I do believe it is that dad's responsibility to sit down and listen and try and understand, because otherwise he's simply going to lose his child. His child's going to wear a dress, wear some makeup, and then everybody's going to say, you're trans, you're non-binary, you're genderqueer. And the kid's going to get sucked into that world where really the father could just say, hey, you know what? Why do you like dresses? Why do you want to dress up? Do you like the fabric? Do you like the feeling?
That's right.
I do like colors. Are you creative?
But that dad, his only the problem there is dad is only seeing a very specific group of LGBTQ people, and that's scaring him. So of course, I get
they're the ones that are making him afraid.
That's right. Yes. That's exactly right. So instead of seeing people like maybe me or you, or somebody who's a little more conservative, or somebody who, look, there's gay people represented in the political space now. I mean, we're all over the place, and so there are conservative gays. there are gays who don't want to be flamboyant and out there. Blah. They actually want to just live a quote unquote normal life, not be giving attention to themselves. And, that was the whole point of me in my transition, was to go from a woman to live as a man, and not to have, any of the stuff that I'm getting pushback on today, because I'm the wrong kind of trans person. That is just ridiculous behavior. As I say, you're the wrong kind of gay. But it says a lot about community to me. And it says to me that, what is community? Is it actually really culty, or is it actually a space where we're supposed to thrive on each other's differences because we actually have an ultimate goal? My goal is the same as yours, which is what? To live free. in a country where we're supposed to be free.
Freedom.
And when you start shutting down
freedom.
voices that you don't like, which is actually very dangerous because you think you're getting threatened by me or because you don't like the way I, so you're just going to shut me down. It's going to come back to bite you all in the ass. I'm going to tell you right now, because it's not, you can shut me down, but there's going to be somebody else worse than me, way worse than me. That's going to come and just, instead of listening to what I'm saying and saying, look, I don't hate anybody in my community at all. In fact, I love my community, but nobody wants to have those conversations unless you're literally on the same narrative. And that to me is not a community. And I refuse to be, as a 59-year-old transsexual man who transitioned 27 years ago and has gotten kicked in my face from every kind of person in this world. You think I'm going to shut up because a bunch of trans people are telling me I'm not saying the right thing? In fact, it's made me louder. And it's made more people like yourself, who I don't necessarily align with politically, but it doesn't make me hate you. It makes me actually respect you, because I respect people with different opinions. I learn from you. I get to actually understand why you think the way you think. My parents are like you, and that's okay. I love my parents. I spend a ton of time with my parents.
Yourself. So you would not call yourself a Trump supporter?
No, I am not a Trump supporter, but that doesn't mean
okay.
That does not mean.
No, of course. I can tell just by talking to you that you know who I am. I mean, I'm Lady Maga USA.
I would not be here I would not be here, my friend. I saw your name. I looked at you. I know exactly what you stand for, and that's okay with me. That's called democracy. Jesus, what is wrong with this world? This country is built on democracy. When you start recalling people in elections, that's not democracy. That is actually riding over democracy. When you say that person wasn't voted in legally, you have to sit with it, whether you like it or not, because we have a democracy. Whether you like the president who's in office today or yesterday or when Trump was, I sat with it. And I learned a lot.
You and me, we could probably have a little hissy fight. I'll act like a woman in the fight in drag, and you'll be the man, the alpha man coming for me. By the way, you have amazing tattoos. I don't know if you'd agree with this. I mean, I don't want to get too sidetracked because we're here to talk about your specific journey.
Yes, right on.
And in conclusion, with that father and that child, the key is education, education must entail all viewpoints. And I think you would agree that education about transgender procedures, and the consequences, the medical consequences of having to take hormones for the rest of your life. Because if there's a national emergency and a war tomorrow and you can't find access to your hormones, you would be in a very difficult situation. And
are you kidding? I would be actually that's my lifeblood.
Right.
You know, there is no other information out there because they block it. So just so you know, me and a bunch of men like me, transsexual men and transsexual women and detransitioners and doctors and lawyers have created a website called genderdysphoriaalliance.com.
So anyway, repeat that. Let me repeat that for you. Genderdysphoriaalliance.com. Fascinating. And are they anti-trans? Do they hate trans people?
We are all trans ourselves, and we love it, and it saved our lives. But what we're doing is we're putting in a language that is missing, which deals with what is gender dysphoria, how to find a doctor, who are these parents being spoken to. We're doing the thing that's not being done. We're giving people an opportunity to learn about what it means to be an actual transsexual person. We're not doing all that other stuff over there. They can do whatever they want, but they don't. So here's what I want to say. Why is what we're doing dangerous? Because they're coming after us, which is so weird to me, when we're just putting down what we as our own selves have had experience with and what we believe in. So why are we being run over by a community that's supposed to be about?
Well, we know why. Because they need an ever-expanding victim narrative. That is why they added the letter Q to the so-called community. Q means nothing. It means questioning or queer. Every human being, if they're honest, has had a little questioning moment where they said, you know, that girl's bikini looks really great. Or my buddy and I, you know, we were kind of almost holding hands because he's so awesome. So anybody can question. And the word queer means nothing. LGBTQIA intersex. My question to you, Buck, is what does an intersex person have to do with you or me? That is a completely separate journey.
That's right. And they get mad about it. You know that.
Of course.
They don't want to belong to that because it is not transgender. It is an actual medical condition.
It's not homosexual. It's not lesbian. It's not transgender. That's another letter. And to me, that's recruitment, trying to expand the victim narrative and thus power in numbers.
Yep.
Asexual. You tell me, what in the heck does a person who is not interested in sex at all have to do with a narrative that is primarily based on sexuality? LGBT. T doesn't necessarily have to do a lot with sexuality.
Doesn't, and it's being removed.
But it does have something to do with sex organs and identification.
So that was always the argument from the new trans community. Well, we're not. So then an organization removed the T and created an LGBT alliance, and then the trans people went off on them. I'm like, you're being transphobic.
I follow LGBT alliance. I think I feel like they have a heck of a lot to say, because I'll be frank with you. I identify with my body. I love to dress up. I'm gay, whatever. Excellent. And I can understand my relationship with a lesbian woman because she's just on the opposite side. She's attracted to the same gender, and a bisexual person kind of goes with. I never understood why my homosexuality is linked with the T. And I've met a lot of trans people who say we are our own group. And so sounds like your website. Repeat it one more time for me.
Sure. Gender dysphoria alliance.com. And I appreciate that a lot. And I think a lot of people who are kind of investigating what it even means to me, I think that you'll enjoy our website because we're really medical. We're really on point. We're not trying to fluff up words. We're like direct. This is what's going on, and this is what we believe in. And we want to create safe space for people to transition. It's not, they call it gatekeeping. You know, they make all these hot button words, and they're very gaslighty. We created safe space, and it's a space for people to learn.
Safe space is a little bit of a trigger word for me because it sounds like anything goes. If you are counseling a transgender child or a child who thinks that they are transgender, I want you to just be completely transparent and honest. Is your first solution medical transition?
No.
Okay, that's all I needed to know.
No.
People can also go to getoutspoken.com with the Log Cabin Republicans, because I know you don't consider yourself a Republican or a Trump supporter, but of course the gays on the right who are going against the narratives in many ways. That's not necessarily political. It's just about the radicalization of the LGBT.
But that's why me and you align on many thoughts. I'm sure. I'm totally anti-cancel culture. That's fascist weird stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
What are you talking about? You don't like what I'm saying. If you don't like what I'm saying, boop, there's a button right there. Turn it off. But don't you dare tell me I cannot speak my voice. And then you get to call me all these names, and everyone in the community supporting you for calling me names. They're all a bunch of hypocrites, and it's disgusting. And that's why I'll stand there. I will stand and take the shots. Every day you shoot at me, I will take those shots, because I guarantee you this old trans guy did not make it this far by being a little Twinkie and worrying about whether or not everyone's going to hurt my feelings. No, you will not hurt my feelings. In fact, the more you shoot at me, the more I'm coming at you, because that's what I learned. I learned to stand up for myself. Okay. My trans stuff is over here. My gay stuff is over here. Me as a human being who lives in a free country knows this. I'm allowed to speak my mind. You cannot shut me down. You can try and try and try, but I will pop up just like that little mole in that game. I will continue to pop up until my voice is heard. So that's that. Sorry.
Look, honestly, you know what cracks me up? I do get backlash from some on the right who say you're not a real conservative, and they would also not support you saying that you're free speech and all that.
That's right.
But I will say you are more of an alpha man and more of a red-blooded patriot than 90% of the little trolls online, the little conservative trolls with a fake profile picture.
That's right.
Saying you are not a conservative. You are not standing up for free speech. You are a red-blooded patriot. Can I ask you if you support the Second Amendment?
Well, the Second Amendment, I'm sorry.
The right to keep and bear arms.
Okay, great. So that one. So I am a little bit twisted on that. I'll be honest with you. Now I want you to understand my family is in the military. My family is police. So I am very, which people would call, oh my God, they would just freak out about it. But that being said, I say I sit in the middle here. Okay. I think we need a little bit more I think everyone has the right to bear arms for sure. But that being said, I do think we need to fix the system. I believe the system is too out of control and anyone could just get a gun. And I don't believe in that. And I believe that that's the reason why we have so much tragedy with these shootings in this country, because it's too easy to walk in and get something. That is, I look at it the same way as trans surgery. It's just too easy without giving people some opportunity to understand the weight of owning a gun. The weight of owning a gun is huge. I don't own guns. My sisters own guns, and that's fine.
I don't think you should say that publicly, though, honey. You got some enemies out there. Don't tell people you don't own a gun. No, but you'll kick their butt. I've seen your muscles.
Address. You know what? I'll put my address.
No. I personally know how crazy these people are, and I want you to be safe. I'm so glad, actually, that because I thought we were going to align a lot more closely, like on other political issues, and I'm so glad. But you know what? You could jump on that train and probably, maybe get some more followers or whatever, but because you stick to your guns and you're a free thinker and you don't just jump up with the NRA. And by the way, I did not jump with the NRA and I don't talk about guns to get followers.
Let me just tell you something. I believe in the Second Amendment. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I don't believe in is how lax the program is. Okay. I do think it needs some systematic change. And that, and that could be with so many things. My sister was a police officer for 30 plus years. And so I have a lot of empathy for that work because I've seen it firsthand and what it did to my sister. It just mentally destroyed her. But people don't care. People just have this one understanding of the police that they're all bad and no, there's a lot of great police officers out there and they serve us and they do the job. But then we always have these one wing nutty people that just ruin it for all of us. And that's with everything.
Yes. Yes. Well, Buck, it has been an honor to talk to you. I kind of feel like you and we could quite literally talk for 4 to 5 hours about everything, but it's so refreshing to have a conversation with someone who is so open, so honest, and quite frankly, so vulnerable. Thank you for putting yourself out there. I do have an idea and a request that actually just kind of came to me. I think a panel or an event with me and you and maybe someone on the left, it's hard to get them to talk with us because they know that they never win actually in like fact-based debates like you and I. But even if it was just a conservative forum or an organization that wants to hear different perspectives about trans issues, if ever you know anybody or you hear of an opportunity, I would love for a lot of people to see this conversation. And I have my podcast. I don't even know how many people listen. I don't really check the numbers. I know it's a lot, but
great.
I feel like a forum or some sort of, broadcasted debate / conversation with people like you and me is critical so that the parents out there,
that's right,
like the father of that 14-year-old vulnerable teenager, can say, whoa, I never thought about it that way. Thought about it that way. And just at the end of the day, the idea that a drag artist or a drag queen is the same as trans is so pervasive on the right, and it actually gets pretty frustrating. So last but not least, I want anyone who listens to this podcast to support Buck, but I'm going to preface this by letting you know that he is a free speech absolutist, and part of his American entrepreneur free speech is that he does have a website, and it's buckangel.com, buckangel.com. Now, just a fair warning for those of us who, are not necessarily interested, he does sell romantic objects to help consenting adults enjoy their bodies and enjoy one another. So if you're going to clutch your pearls and freak out, there is some sexual adult content on his websites and on his Twitter. But of course, that's his free speech, and he keeps it in the appropriate realms for adults. And I think that if you want to support him, you could maybe purchase an item that does not have anything to do with sexuality. I see your hat right now says Daddy AF. That's a little risque in itself because of the AF, but I just want people to support you. And what is there a way they can support you if they're not interested in any of the adult?
Just following me, actually. I appreciate the follows because you can learn a lot from me, and I'm very open and I'm very accessible. So, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you warning people. Yeah, I do. I also work in the sexual wellness world. So yeah. So that being said, none of that might be for anyone, and that's okay. That's why I keep everything kind of.
Well, we all have different realms, and our sexuality is not necessarily linked to a lot of our activism, of course. And I know that your activism in standing up for common sense as it pertains to transgender issues is not about sexualizing anyone. And it is not about pushing your sexual anything on anybody else. And I respect that. So if they want to, I know you get so much mail and emails, and I'm guessing about 70% is hate, kind of, people just going after you.
It's so weird, my friend. It literally goes like this. Up and down.
Well, if you're listening to this and Buck has touched your heart, I know one of the greatest gifts that I receive as Lady Maga USA is heartfelt people who just spill their guts and say why what I do has really made them feel stronger and happier. So if you really felt like you learned so much from Buck and you appreciate his literal sacrifice for standing up and being a free speech advocate and an American, how could they contact you? Or if you want him to come speak at an event or something like that, I know I saw on your website and Twitter that people can book you to actually come and talk. So how can they reach you?
So buckangel.com, there's my email there, and you can go to Twitter and DM me. I'm Buck Angel on Twitter, and I'm Buck Angel on Instagram. I don't really use Facebook so much. It's so insane over there. all social media is a little bit crazy.
What's so funny? Twitter for me is a toxic war zone. Facebook actually ends up being very positive. So I get the love on Facebook 90% of the time, and then the hate on Twitter. So that's funny that you kind of said
mine are reversed. Facebook, they can just run over me. But Twitter, I have a huge support. I've amassed a large support on Twitter.
Well, where can we find you on Facebook? Because if people are coming at you, let's send some of the people who listen to this podcast to go and stick up for you. So how can they find you?
So my page is Buck Angel Official. And then my other thing is, I think it's Buck Angel Entertainment. So you can find me under those.
Well, Buck, honestly, like I could just keep going because I absolutely love talking to you. I want you to know that if ever you want to come to Utah, you have a place to stay. Awesome. You're a very manly trans man. I don't know if you would appreciate my princess suite that I have for my guests, but I truly just, I was so nervous about this interview because I really respect you, and your voice is so critical. Never let anyone diminish your light. God bless you in every single thing that you're doing. And let's continue this conversation, whether it's in person sometime or on a forum or whatever. Excellent. Let's shake things up. Let's make people think on the left and the right.
Excellent.
Because there's a lot of education that needs to happen on the right as well. So,
oh my God, everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Well, God bless you. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, friend. Thank you.
Of course.